In the middle of the lockdown, like everyone else, I had a lot of time to look at myself, how I work, why I work, and the sort of processes that I use to create imagery. I had a meeting with somebody and they did something really interesting with their hand, which I asked them to freeze, hold that there. I ran, got a camera and shot that image, and then that was the start of it. And then I realized that somewhere inside me there's been a lifelong obsession with hands, and as you can see I'm starting to use my hands now. So I'm really fascinated with the way that hands play a part in a conversation or an exchange, consciously, subconsciously. I then had a real interesting year or so photographing lots of people's hands. Some people that I knew, strangers, some people I just found them online and invited them to come and photograph with me. I didn't necessarily have a collection in my mind at that time. It was just, I had the time, people seemed to be around because the movement was a bit difficult. And it then became obvious, towards the end at least, that this is something it probably has something to say. And then I came up with the name of hand and drew the signature logo from my handwriting, and here we are. In the sort of write-up about this piece, I mentioned how hands can be used for something brutal, but also something delicate. The same hand could, paint something delicately, but also used to smash something or to break something, but it's exactly the same hand. And what is it inside us that controls those movements in such a opposing way? So if you put, a knife and fork in your hand, you're typically about to eat something, but you could put a paintbrush in your hand and you're about to paint something. It almost changes who you are as a person. So your brain has to go through this exercise of getting ready for that activity, which we don't think about, but it's there. It's like, it probably takes a split second, but what is that change like? What does that mean inside your head? For me personally, something that's interesting is when I have a camera in my hand, the energy that comes in and goes out of the camera, that exchange, which you don't see, but I'm transmitting something through the camera, but I'm also taking in something through the camera, and the camera is just there doing its job mechanically, but my hand is guiding that piece of equipment to do this quite fascinating exchange. I wouldn't say I have favourites from the collection, but one image that really stands out to me is the image of Tamara. His name is Tamara Gabriel, who's an amazing individual, very interesting life story. What I really love about the image is it's organic in the sense that it's a hand and it's alive and a skin and everything, but it's a very graphical shape. It almost has an architectural feel about it. The way that his hands, they almost look like they wouldn't move, if that makes sense to me. They're almost solid. They feel sort of sculptural and rigid in a way. Even obviously they're a hand, but there's something about the way that he just put his hands at that moment that always sticks with me. To me, the idea of having your hand trait taken is as revealing, or could be, as some might see it, vulnerable as having your traditional portrait taken. I think that there's something that lives within our hands that reveals so much about us, but it just, I guess, almost goes unnoticed because we don't feel the need to really wonder how someone feels by looking at their hand, but that information is there. I really wanted to explore the difference between photographing a hand and a face, and what people give you when they let go of this idea that their face will not be seen, although the hands are showing you as much as the face would. But to the sitter, I guess sometimes they don't feel that so much. Obviously, because I am actually a photographer for a living, I did have a few people ask me to photograph their hands commercially as a commission, and that solidified this word of hand trait to me a bit more, because it was something that you could ask for. You could say, could I have my hand trait taken or created? It seems to be something that people don't have a problem with understanding the idea, even though I guess most people, if they say they're having their picture taken, they expect to see their face. But equally, I think lots of people are open to having an image of their hand at the end of the session. And if not, maybe we can photograph their hand and their face and give them the traditional side, cover that one as well. Visual Marvelry is what I use as a description to talk about the way that I work, the way that I interact with clients, and a process that I kind of utilize from somewhere within me to create my work. And over the years it became a name, known as a name, as a brand name if you like, but I don't want to lose sight of the fact that it's really about describing something within me that I draw on to create work. Fueled by my kind of passion and connection with people and my interest in searching into the person I'm photographing, really finding something more than just what's on the surface, something that's maybe a bit vulnerable, familiar. And I find that to be marvelous, and hence the kind of connection to the word Marvelry. If I have the luxury of time, and obviously budget can sometimes be a thing, it's really powerful if I can get to know the person for a while before I shoot them or create anything for them or their brand. This could be through calls, meeting. I start to, ask weird questions such as, what does life mean to you? Or, questions that may not seem relevant at the time, but it's all about me really delving deeply into who that person is, because essentially whatever these people create is part of them. So I need to really know what their creations are, the foundations of their creations, basically. Over the years, I've had quite a few people I've worked with mention this notion of photographic therapy, and feeling, when they've come away from a shoot, feeling that they're energized, or they've seen a side of themselves they didn't really know existed. And it's become something that I think I'm at the point where I could maybe make this part of the service that I provide for people, really speak about that and give good examples, because I have had, like I say, some examples from the past where people have mentioned this. I've created this way of working with clients which I call still stories, which is my way of giving the audience or the viewer a much more slow and considered way of understanding what they're looking at. To me, I love films, I love movies. I feel that often the fast pace of a movie, for my personal self, it forces me to catch up with what's happening. I don't get a chance to really consider what I just saw, because 10 seconds later we're seeing something else. And I think that with a still story, the way that I put them together, it's each frame, you see each frame for quite a few seconds, so you really take that in whilst you're listening to what the person's saying in the background.
My name is Charles Johnson, and I'm a humanistic designer. Empathy is essential for humanistic design. We must be able to step into the spaces and places of others to understand how they can be impacted by what we design.
I've been working on a long-term project called The New Chieftains, which I launched in 2014. I call it a celebration of tenacity. It's my way of exploring and celebrating tenacity within people and looking at the hows and the whys more than the what. So I'm more interested in the way that people live their lives and just choices that they make, rather than what they're actually doing. So I don't focus on their careers or how much money they make or stuff like that. I'm more focused on the reasons behind that choice and the way that that choice impacts their daily lives. I've been featuring some amazing people from all over the world. One of the chapters that stands out to me the most is called Nordic Female Power, and it's basically looking at females from the Nordic region which have this quality which I call power without force, which is kind of a powerful way of living your life, but not forceful. You don't have to be imposing yourself particularly. The project has gone through many phases. I've exhibited and done talks and things about the project. And my end goal, if you like, is to create a beautiful book and to maybe have a sort of Netflix-style documentary one day, if you're watching Netflix. Something that I've been finding more and more these days is that the type of client I'm attracting are at a stage of transformation in either their career or their lives or both. And they kind of come to me to help them with that transformation, to step from one space to another. And the thing that I'm really focused on is how does the person's persona, how does that come across in the world? How do we shape the person that they want to be using some of the elements from the person that they were before? And I've found that the way that I create, not only imagery, but the way that I create personas or tones of voice, if you like, is really intrinsically linked to that. I guess there's a bit of unknown, which is quite exciting for these people, these clients, but also they know that they're in the hands of somebody who's done this before. It's a really interesting time for me right now because I am actually in a state of transformation myself. I've spent many years shooting for, I wouldn't say in a standard way, but shooting in a formula, which is somebody comes to me with a need, which I sometimes frame as a problem, and I help them solve that problem. I give them back the content, the imagery, typically what I've shot, and then that's the job, it's done. Now what it feels like is people are asking me to help them with the broader spectrum. So maybe where those images are going to be used, getting involved in that side of the project or business or whatever it may be. And also influencing that, bringing teams together, really making sure that when the images are supplied, they fit more seamlessly into the structure of what they were created for.